in the furnace of the hills, where silence remembers fire. Joe still breathes, not because the flames died, but because faith refused to.
City of stone and scar, where the night learned to cry. Ashes still whisper names that the wind carries by. Streets once dancing now tremble with memories await. Yet hope stands barefoot at the edge of the gate. Children of dust with tears carved in clay, praying through echoes that won't fade away. But deep in the ruin, a quiet spark grows, a seed in the fire only heaven knows. What is a heart till it walks through flame? What is a soul till it calls his name? Not in the comfort, but in the cry. Faith is proven where dreams go to die. In the crucible we rise, bold in the fire, no disguise. Through the trial, through the pain, grace like rain falls again. We won't break, we won't fall. Tested hearts return as gold. Just will sing through the night. Faith is the city's light. Now I know heaven spoke in time when Abraham climbed with a trembling spine. What was hidden became the flame, obedience carved into history's name. Mirror of wilderness, Gilgal laid bare. God steps back just to meet you there. Hezekiah's crown cracked under pride. Truth don't whisper, it won't hide. Refiner's hand, not to destroy, but to separate the fear from joy. Drops rising in the heat of pain, till only the eternal remains. Search me, oh God.
You know, when engineers build like a deep sea submersible, they don't test the hull integrity in a shallow swimming pool.
Right. I mean, that wouldn't really show you anything.
Exactly. They have to drop it into the abyss miles down where the pressure is just absolutely crushing.
Because the water down there, it doesn't create the microscopic fractures in the metal. It simply exposes what is already compromised.
Yeah, and today we are talking about what happens when that kind of crushing, unrelenting pressure is applied not to titanium, but to, well, the human spirit.
It forces us to confront a pretty terrifying reality. I mean, we all have this baseline assumption of our own faith or our own resilience when the weather is clear.
For sure.
But when you are plunged into the dark, the diagnostic metrics completely change.
Well, welcome to this deep dive, custom tailored for you. We are immersing ourselves today in a really profound teaching from the icomm.CLASSROOM teaching ministry.
Yeah, it's titled Knowing and Being Known, Trusting and Being Trusted, and Walking with God.
And what makes this discussion so vital is the environment it was forged in. I mean, this isn't some abstract theology being debated in a comfortable university lecture hall.
No, not at all.
We are looking at teaching notes, live reflections, and just raw discussions from a Christian community living in Jos, Nigeria, which is a region currently enduring severe, ongoing violence and, systemic insecurity.
And the overarching mission of this teaching is to bridge a massive gap. Like, how do you connect the vast promised deliverance of God with the incredibly intimate, messy, and frankly, often horrific reality of human suffering?
Right.
This community is using these theological concepts not as a rigid set of religious rules, but as an absolute survival mechanism against real-world violence.
And I want you, the listener, to keep your own life in mind as we navigate this. Think about a time when chaos threatened to completely capsize your world. Have you ever felt like your current circumstances were testing the very core of who you are?
Because that is the daily waking reality for the believers in Joseph.
Okay, let's unpack this. There's a participant in this teaching, a man named Tunde, and he brings up this concept of the spiritual scanner.
Yeah, that phrase really stuck out to me.
Right. To this community, the ongoing geopolitical violence isn't just a physical threat. I mean, obviously it is that. but it also acts as a spiritual crucible.
And Tunde's honesty about this is just jarring. He openly confesses that this scanner is revealing some incredibly dark things in his own heart.
Yeah, like anger, deep-seated fear, and an overwhelming desire for retaliation.
Exactly. He talks about wishing there was a clause in his faith that just permitted him to fight back, to match the violence with violence.
Which is such a human response.
It completely is. And his vulnerability highlights the function of the crucible. The political instability didn't inject anger or fear into Tunde. It just stripped away the polite peacetime exterior and forced his internal survival instincts right to the surface.
It exposes the fault lines.
Right.
But, I understand the mechanics of that, but I'd have to push back a little on the underlying theology here.
Okay, go for it.
If God is entirely omniscient-like, he possesses all knowledge, past, present, and future, why does he need a crucible or a scanner to run a diagnostic on Tunde's heart? Doesn't he already have all the data? Putting traumatized people through a stress test just to see how they'll react sounds less like a loving creator and more like, a cruel scientist playing with lab rats.
This raises an important question, and that tension is exactly why we have to really examine the biblical definition with the word know.
Okay.
In Western thought, knowing is often just data collection, right? It's downloading a spreadsheet of facts. But the Hebrew concept used throughout these texts is yada.
Yada.
Yeah, yada is an intimate, bidirectional, experiential exchange. God already possesses the factual data of your psychological profile. What he desires is to know you experientially in the context of a lived relationship.
So it's like the difference between reading a biography about a famous person and actually living in the same house as them for 20 years.
Yes, precisely that. And the critical factor is that God initiates this yada through deliverance. The teacher draws a really fascinating parallel to Exodus 19.
With the Israelites.
Right. The Israelites are slaves in Egypt, making bricks in the mud. God doesn't walk up to them and demand strict obedience as a prerequisite for their freedom.
He rescues them first.
Exactly. He brings them to Sinai and says, "You have seen what I did to Egypt and how I carried you on eagle wings to myself."
Wow, on eagle wings. So he establishes the relationship by doing the heavy lifting. He pulls them out of the abyss first.
Only after that rescue does he say, "Now obey." But the relationship requires testing to become experiential. Deuteronomy 8 explicitly states that God led them into the wilderness for 40 years to humble them and to test them.
To see what was actually in their hearts.
Yes. He allowed them to experience hunger and then provided unfamiliar manna. The text says he did this to know what was in their hearts, to see if they would keep his commandments when the comfort of Egypt was gone.
He wants to experience their reliance in real time. That completely reframes the concept of a trial. It reminds me of the teacher's focus on Abraham in Genesis 12.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Because God commands Abraham to leave his three biggest safety nets, his country, his relatives, and his father's household. In the ancient Near East, leaving the walled city of your family wasn't just like a career change.
No, it was surrendering your literal defense against bandits, starvation, and rival tribes.
Exactly. You traded a physical fortress for an invisible promise. And God provides absolutely no geographical map or GPS for this journey.
Right.
If Abraham has a map, his security is in his own ability to navigate. By withholding the map and only offering a promise, Abraham is forced to rely entirely on the character of the one making the promise.
And his decision to walk out of those city gates allows God to experientially know his faith. It's that bidirectional yada we were just talking about.
Abraham learns the reality of God's provision, and God experiences Abraham's devotion in the face of the unknown.
Which shifts us into the next phase of this relational rhythm, because once you experientially know someone, once you have been in the wilderness with them and seen their character, the natural next step is trust.
Right, but the sources define trust in a very specific physical way.
They do. The Hebrew text offers a definition of trust that radically departs from our modern understanding. The word is batak.
Batak. And the physical translation of this word just stopped me in my tracks.
Yeah, because we often assume trust means forcing yourself to not be afraid. We think if our heart is racing during a crisis, our faith must be weak.
Oh, I've definitely felt that way.
But batak doesn't mean the absence of fear. It literally translates to relocating your full weight.
And just think about the physical mechanics of that. It's like, imagine a mountain climber who has been scaling this sheer vertical cliff face for hours.
Oh, man.
Their muscles are burning, their hands are bleeding, and they are terrified of falling to their death. They finally haul themselves onto a narrow ledge where a massive, deeply rooted tree is growing out of the rock.
Okay, I see where you're going.
But Talk isn't standing next to the tree and admiring its strength. But Talk is the moment that exhausted climber completely collapses their entire body weight onto that trunk.
Yes.
Their heart is still pounding, the drop is still terrifying, but they have transferred the burden of their survival entirely onto the tree.
It is a deliberate transfer of structural integrity. And the danger, as warned in Proverbs 3.5, is transferring your weight onto something that cannot hold you.
Right, leaning on our own understanding.
Exactly. The proverb instructs us not to do that, because in a crisis, human nature instinctively reaches for self-security measures. We lean our full weight on our bank accounts, our intelligence, our career status, or, our physical safety protocols.
But those are incredibly fragile trees to lean on during a hurricane. I mean, a bank account won't stop the violence sweeping through a city like Jos. When a true structural crisis hits, human safety protocols just collapse.
This is illustrated so powerfully in the Gospel of John, chapter 6, the story of Jesus walking on the water.
Oh yeah.
The disciples are in a boat, attempting to cross the sea at night. A violent storm whips up. And it is worth noting that several of these men were seasoned, professional fishermen.
Right, they knew the water.
They intimately understood the weather. Yet, the text makes it clear they were terrified. Their human expertise, their own understanding, was entirely insufficient for the sheer violence of the storm.
And then Jesus comes walking toward them on the water, and in the darkness, they mistake him for a ghost. So now they are dealing with a deadly squall and what they believe is a supernatural threat.
Notice the sequence of how Jesus handles their terror, though. He steps right into the chaos. He says, "It is I, do not be afraid."
But he doesn't immediately stop the storm.
No, he doesn't instantly flatten the waves. He offers them his presence in the middle of the violence. The invitation of Batak here is for the disciples to relocate their sense of security from the physical stability of the wooden boat, which is frankly failing them, onto his presence, while the wind is still screaming in their ears.
Wow. And listener, think about that. When you are in the middle of a storm, are you relocating your weight onto God? Or are you demanding that he's stop the storm first? Are you holding your trust hostage until he calms the weather?
It requires an entirely different spiritual posture. And it becomes infinitely more complex when you realize this relocation of trust isn't happening in isolation.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because if you are collapsing your weight onto Christ in the middle of a storm, you are doing it in a boat full of other terrified people.
Right. It's not just you.
We're moving from the individual heart to the communal body. If we're relocating our weight onto God, we must also walk with him together.
A participant named Shadrach makes this point brilliantly. He observes that walking with God is never a solo hike. You are tethered to a community. You are walking as a family, and because everyone around you is flawed, frightened, and dealing with their own trauma, the journey is inevitably going to generate intense friction.
Yet, toes will definitely get stepped on. Put a group of people under the sustained psychological pressure of a geopolitical conflict, and tempers are going to snap.
Absolutely.
Trauma makes humans defensive.
Yeah.
We get short-tempered. We lash out at the people closest to us because we just feel out of control.
Which makes the scriptural demands on the community feel almost impossibly heavy. Leviticus 19 commands the people not to harbor hatred in their hearts, not to spread slander, and to reason frankly with their neighbors rather than plotting revenge.
That's a high bar.
It is. And Jesus takes this baseline and amplifies it in Luke chapter 17. He warns his disciples that offenses and interpersonal damage are inevitable. But he tethers the practice of their faith to the brutal, exhausting work of continuous forgiveness.
Right.
He commands that if a brother sins against you 7 times in a single day and turns back 7 times in repentance, you must forgive him.
And the disciples' reaction to that is incredibly validating. They don't just nod politely. They essentially panic and say, "Lord, give us more faith." Because forgiving someone who keeps wounding you out of their own unresolved trauma 7 times before sunset, that just defies human capability.
It demands supernatural endurance, and it emphasizes that this walk isn't confined to Sunday services. True walking with God happens moment by moment in the messy reality of homes, neighborhoods, the marketplace, and, the grocery store.
It's the sharing of life as seen in Acts 2.
Yes, it's choosing not to retaliate when someone insults you because you know they are secretly terrified for their children's safety. It is absorbing the offense.
But this brings us to the most agonizing part of the teaching. Absorbing a personal insult from a stressed neighbor is one thing. But how do we maintain this communal walk when the world around us is literally falling apart?
That is the big question.
Like referencing the raw trauma the believers in Joe's are currently enduring, when the violence isn't just interpersonal friction, but systemic slaughter.
What's fascinating here is how knowing, trusting, and walking loop together. When Tunda asked how to console people whose loved ones were literally cut to pieces, the sources point back to Jesus.
Because you can't just offer platitudes to that level of grief.
No, you can't. And the teaching anchors directly into an incident in Luke 13. A group of people came to Jesus with a horrific news report. The Roman governor, Herod, had slaughtered a group of Galileans and mixed their blood with their religious sacrifices.
Oh, wow.
It was an act of profound political violence and intentional sacrilege meant to terrorize the population.
You have to imagine the people bringing this report were looking for Jesus to validate their outrage. They wanted him to condemn Herod, to fix the political injustice.
But Jesus didn't fix the political injustice of Herod. He used the tragedy to call people to watch their own hearts and repent. He asks the crowd if they think those murdered Galileans were worse sinners than anyone else. He tells them no, but warns, unless you repent, you will all likewise perish.
Wait, I have to pause here. Telling a grieving, traumatized community to reflect on their own sins after a massacre sounds incredibly tone-deaf. Why would he redirect their attention to their internal posture when they are bleeding from an external injustice?
It's about protecting them from spiritual annihilation. If a victim's ultimate focus remains entirely on the external injustice they cannot control, their soul will inevitably rot into bitterness.
The trauma metabolizes into vengeance.
Exactly. When that happens, the victim slowly turns into the very monster they are fighting. By calling them to examine their own hearts, Jesus is establishing a boundary between their trauma and their identity.
He's cutting off the oxygen to the cycle of violence.
He is giving them agency over the one territory the empire cannot touch, their internal connection to God. And the teacher reminds us that while we should maintain practical safety measures, our ultimate security must never lean on them.
So it all comes full circle. God delivers us so we can know him experientially.
Yes.
We relocate our full weight onto him even while terrified. That's batak.
Right.
And we embark on this messy communal walk that requires endless forgiveness.
Which brings us to the community's closing prayer. And it is staggering. They pray with a fierce acknowledgement that God is absolutely not the author of the evil surrounding them.
That distinction is so important.
It is. They ask for forgiveness for the moments when the pain became so blinding that they blamed him for the atrocities. And their final petition is for the strength to remain yoked together with Christ through both the good and the horrifying times.
A yoke is such a gritty, heavy image. It makes the heavy plow of life bearable because you aren't pulling it alone.
He gets into the harness with you.
Which leaves us with the ultimate vision presented in the sources. The church God always intended. One movement, one heart, walking together through the fire.
And that forces us to consider the long-term implications for our own lives. What is the spiritual scanner revealing in your heart today?
When it's just you and me. In the crucible we rise, cold in the fire, no disguise. Through the sorrow, through the flame, love still calls us by our name. We won't hate, we won't repay. Mercy walks a higher way. Just will shine through the night. Faith
is the city's light.
No retaliation.
No revenge in my hand.
I choose the cross
I choose to stand.
where blood cried out,
Let mercy speak
power made perfect.
in the weak.
Church bells ringing through broken walls, sanctuary rising where the shadow falls, hands that feed where hunger remains, healing flowing through unseen veins, community built in the valley of loss, carrying burdens at the foot of the cross, not just survivors but living proof that faith can rebuild
What fire removes?